So yeah, security is hard, but first a little bit about myself. Well, I gave a 2-minute intro. A lot of you were already here, but quick recap. My name is Joran. I'm Dutch. Hoi. I'm currently at Consensus Diligence, working mostly on our product. So you might know Mythex, which is doing automated security. And more recently, we've been building all of these tools, including Scribble, aimed at property-based testing that essentially give you a little bit of more customizability. In my own time, I like to tweet about things or do some bug bounties. It's a nice hobby. So when I got invited to speak here at TrustX, the topic suggestion was secure coding, and I had a little bit of a laugh because it's way too difficult. I basically came up with this question, how do you write secure code? And I think a lot of people kind of go through these stages of, to the stages that kind of match grief. So first, there's this step where people have denial, and they're like, well, I don't need to worry about security. This audit, we're going to be fine. There's not going to be any bugs. It just works. Maybe we've all been this guy once, but yeah. So that's the first step. And then there's anger. You're like, why isn't this working? And you blame someone else. So it's either the library that you're working on, or maybe there's a compiler bug. Who knows? But then maybe it's not the compiler, maybe it's something else. Maybe you just need to recompile, or maybe you just say that it's an accepted risk. This is kind of the most funny step, I think, especially when you read these bug bounty programs where they're like, this is out of scope, which, yeah, interesting approach to security. Then afterwards, people are like, nah, this smart contract thing is never going to work out. I'm just going to do something else, maybe do some art, create some NFTs. And in the end, we arrive at this point of acceptance. Basically, we know that we'll never write secure code. Well, so I don't believe there's no secure code out there or bug-free code out there. It's just really difficult to get there. And really, the way I think about it, and I think everybody should almost think about it, is that you just gotta get the best effort, the best you can do, given your resources. So, what do you do? I think here there are a few things you can do, and I think the 1% rule applies a lot here. There's a few 1% rules, but in this case, I'm talking about the one where you do a bunch of little things that each decrease your risk by a little. But by doing a lot of them, you get this compounding returns, and you end up with a pretty decent or pretty secure system in the end. And one of the areas of things, of 1% things that you can do is by changing the problem that you're working on. So I think a big part here, and I'm not a super expert on language design, but it is language design. The fact that Solidity added the default safe math implementation has been huge. We don't need to worry about this kind of bug anymore. Well, unless you do gas golfing or unchecked, okay, but then it's your fault. And this is all in the aspect of language design. One thing I think Solidity nails and pioneered is this, or I believe pioneered, is this Underhanded contest, which just finished last week, I think, and was presented yesterday. And it's really awesome because you essentially do this crowdsourcing of ambiguities and weird bits. And then afterwards, I believe they remove or try to remove a lot of them. If you compare this to JavaScript, there's such an insane amount of things where you see some code, you think it does something, but it does something completely different. And with this contest, like HETIP, they did a great thing there to figure out things in the language that they could improve. With language design, there's a ton of trilemmas. Like there's performance that you need to worry about. There is esotericness, like there's a bunch of really fancy languages with like new type systems and they can do awesome things to help you write correct code, but then nobody is ever going to use that language because it's too esoteric, and you end up in the situation you were left off. So I don't think like there's a complete perfect picture where we can fix language design, but this is like a great part to improve like the problem of things that we're working on. The second thing, and this goes a little bit towards a question I asked during the panel as well, is library design. And Open Zeppelin has done a lot of work here, and it's awesome because it kind of makes it so that you have to write less code, so there's less you can do in a bad way. And also, the library designers can do things by making, for example, a lot of things private so you can't mess things up, to make it so that you yourself end up with more secure code. And so the ideal here is that you write as little code as possible to get to your desired business logic, and then end up, with a semi-secure system. The other thing you can do is just don't try to solve as complex a problem as some people are trying to do. I really am personally most confident in the smart contract protocols that just try to do something small and simple, and they do it well. If you try to do like everything at the same time, make some huge system with all of these dependencies and everything, well, as an auditor or security-minded person, it's pretty scary. And taking a smaller problem, one, makes it easier for security people to think about your system, but it also makes it way more difficult to mess up. Although this is, again, a 1% rule, it's still possible to mess up. Cool. You can change the problem, but you can also change the method, the way you go about things. And, well, like the previous three things were kind of in this general area, but there's a few things that are more specific in the way you approach things. And I think the first one is very much related to DevOps. And not in the way that you're used to hearing about DevOps, like managing infrastructure and all of that kind of stuff, but more of the philosophy behind DevOps, which is very much inspired by concepts in Lean, for example. And so one of these concepts is the idea of a feedback loop. You write your code, and then at some point, something or somebody gives you feedback on it. This can be your unit test, it can be a verification framework, or it can be an auditor. And one of the core principles of DevOps is that you want to make this feedback loop as short as possible, because it optimizes so many of your processes and it makes the actual work easier. So what you do here is you test early and often. You write unit tests, you write your specification. Ideally, you write it in a language such that you can use fuzzing or formal verification. That would be awesome. And you start early. The next thing you can do is study. And so this might be the wrong crowd because all of you are security nerds, but I think you would overestimate auditors if you just believe you don't need to worry about security. You do your audit, they tell you everything, and then you can just fix it. I think this is maybe the first feedback loop that you need to fix, where you can assess your own security, and then like get more secure code, be more ready for an audit. There's another aspect to this as well. If you just get the 2 weeks of audit time and you've never thought about security before, after the audit, there will be a bunch of issues. You'll fix them, but you'll need another audit for sure, maybe 3. Like it just keeps on going. So I think, yeah, studying is just the first thing that you really, really need to do. Another practice, which I think is interesting. I personally don't really like it, but I know a lot of people do use it and do have success with it, is approaches to like your mental state or how you actually approach the development process. And one of the things here is pair or extreme programming, which is very interesting, where you sit down with 2 people, both developers, and you do everything in tandem. And this forces you to, well, keep all the best practices in mind. Like you can't do shortcuts because the other person will be like, hey, you forgot to write the test here, or hey, maybe we should write the specification here. The other aspect to it as well is, or I think there's really 2 other aspects to it, like the ability of like discussing design while you're thinking about it can be super useful. I know, like I've been sometimes I've listened to conversations between my colleagues, and just from like discussion, I figured out a pretty severe vulnerability. And developers doing this can have the same result. And the other part is you are way more focused. So I heard a story about a company doing extreme programming where developers that just joined the company had to do naps after 6 hours because they were just too intense in the process. I'm not sure if that's a good thing, but at least you're focused on the work. I don't think that can hurt. I think, so in all of this, I think testing and tooling play a major part in almost all the 3 things. I'm sure everyone uses unit tests, and they're great. Don't stop using them, but there's so many things you can do to improve over them. You can use techniques like mutation testing to improve like the unit testing process itself. So to give a bit of background, I know we talked about it briefly in the panel as well. Mutation testing is this idea where you take a code base with unit tests and you insert bugs to see if the test suite would catch them. And then if it doesn't, you know, the test suite sucks. And if it does, then you have some sense of a guarantee, way better than code coverage, which tells you not that much. It's like you can cover 100% of the code base and then not have any assertion, so it wouldn't find a bug if it was there. And that actually happens. There are projects that write one unit test that does everything, and then it wouldn't find a bug if it was there. And probably if you just have one unit test that covers everything, there's a few bugs in there. And then I think like an easy way to extend over like properties is this thing called property-based testing. So DevTools kind of pioneered like introducing this into the community, but there are so many frameworks now that allow you to do this. It's insane. And I mean, the easiest way is to just take your frameworks thing and write these, like we call them maybe superpowered unit tests. It's like a unit test where you give parameters to it, the fuzzer or a property-based tester is allowed to pick, and then you get these way stronger guarantees because it's not you that can just forget to add an edge case. It's a system that iterates through a bunch of things, and a computer is just much better at iterating through things than humans. And then afterwards, you go, so this would be fuzzing, and afterwards you might even use more formal methods like symbolic execution, or yeah, maybe tutorial, like what Muli was just talking about. And another like kind of separate category to these things is automated analysis. It's kind of a misnomer on this slide. It's the range of tools that just do vulnerability scanning regardless of your specific business logic. So there's all of these like I guess, solidity or smart contract gotchas that are encoded in these static analysis or sometimes dynamic analysis tools that you can just use, and they're fairly easy to use, I think. And they create also these really, really short feedback loops. You run the tool and you get the information. And you can add them to CI so that every PR has this information. And it's great. So then after you've done all of these different things, you end up with all of these layers of security, and I think that's also like the right way to think about security. Like a bunch of layers that make sure that not that many bugs come through and end up on production. And well, I have just been talking about like coding practices, smart contract development practices. But if you think about it, audits or bounties and that kind of stuff also fits in here in this mental model as well, where everything just adds a layer of protection, preventing you from getting wrecked. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for joining. And there's some time for questions.
All right. If anyone has a question on is security hard or security is not hard, we would love to hear. And Joran has the answers for that.
Hi. Yeah, I'm just wondering, how much are we as a community taking in from the learnings that have been learned, I think, to at least some extent in the normal IT security community? I mean, of course, I used to go to IT security meetings and community meetings. That'd be, 1,000 people in this room minimum. And they have spent inordinate amount of time and money trying to tackle this issue, right? So there must be something that they must have learned, right? And I'm wondering if there's something that we can take advantage of. I'm saying this because I've had this issue in other areas where I've seen, especially in the IT security industry, they were sort of trying to reinvent the wheel of accident investigations, for example. And if you have a look at, of course, airplanes and trains and things like that, they spend inordinate amount of money and time and effort in trying to figure out accidents and why they happen. And they don't follow any of those best practices. And of course, crap happens all the time. Thankfully, in the Ethereum ecosystems, we have at least transparency, which helps with that. But what I'm trying to say is that, learning from another industry that had to tackle similar issues, at least, and trying to apply the same ideas can help in not trying to reinvent the wheel.
So all of this is not specific to Ethereum. Like, all of this is what you would also do to make sure your C programs are correct. There's domain-specific things. Formal verification is way less popular in other industries, or is popular in some industries and not in others. There's also incident response is way different for us, because once the money is gone, it's gone. In a lot of cases, not all cases. But you see, I think, more and more things being picked up and included in our security processes as well. In terms of the EIP security process, I think there was a step added a few years ago to do a security assessment by my awesome colleague over there. Or he contributed to that. And I think there's a lot of learnings that we take from other industries. But we're not 1,000 people yet. I think Rajiv is trying to solve that. Or security. Yes, it is secure. Sorry. Other questions? Or did that answer it? Good enough. Nice.
Yeah, hi. What's currently the biggest mistake you see projects make? What's currently the biggest thing they can do to improve their security? So if I know you laid out the different layers and the way in general, you can improve it. But if you look at the current landscape, what's the one thing? security needs to be done?
It really depends on where you're at already, like which ones you already have, but probably learning about security is the main thing. Like if you're completely clueless, nothing will, well, it will help you, but that's like a key enabler for all of the other things. And I mean, if you're not yet writing unit tests, that's also like pretty limited, so start with that. But this is all like, there's a lot of things that build on top of the other things, and there's a lot of compounding results, so just picking one thing isn't gonna be great. But if you like all of these things are kind of synergetic. But yeah, learning about security would be my first recommendation for people if they haven't already.
So like, would you say like the general protocols are now not very like they know about security yet? Like what level do you think they are in general?
Oh, it depends on the protocol. Like there's so many smart people at different protocols, and there's protocols that, yeah, in my point of view, are mostly a money grab, and they fork something, change a few lines, don't really understand what that means, and then everything gets stolen. So yeah, that really depends. But like some of the major protocols are insanely good at their knowledge of security. Like they could just quit their job and start to become auditors if they'd like to.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi. So I don't want to complain, but I think the focus so far was very much that we look at the contracts with lens, and we focus on the tiny bits, yeah, and we hope to put those contracts in the boxes, make sure those boxes are secure. But when we start integrating them and the models, then are there some frameworks or already processes or guidelines how go about the integration security? So most of the attacks that we hear about is now some kind of Oracle manipulation, or things that people take protocols that should be safe or are safe if you look through the code, but they get attacked with flash loans, or there are some MEV attacks that can drain them, even though, like in the details, everything is fine. Yeah, when you put the system together, it fails. And I know it's hard. So at my embedded software company, nobody wants to write integration tests because they are so hard. You have to have the whole system in mind, plug many parameters, configure everything. But it's something also that we have to look for, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is super difficult with DeFi. Systems are getting super complex. So there's a few things to unpack. Like there's issues that you can make yourself by like creating compositions of libraries. Maybe like the multi-send is pretty dangerous if you don't do it right, and in that way you can have vulnerabilities that arise from like composition of different systems or different libraries. You also have like these DeFi vulnerabilities. Some of the ones you mentioned, I think, are documented pretty well, and it's well known what you need to look out for. But I think or if I would have to make a prediction, there will be more types of bugs that we don't really know about yet that arise from like that emerge from DeFi with new primitives arriving every day. Like assumptions that we have right now that we didn't really think about, but that are going to be violated by new systems in the future. And unfortunately, the problem here is kind of fundamental, because it's like a limitation of knowledge. It's kind of hard to know what you don't know. It's like the black swan problem. And yeah, I don't have a solution for that one. Sorry. I think we're at time, right? Cool.